And hello everyone, welcome back to another CSS tutorial. So in this tutorial, we will be taking a look at Flexbox. So here with margin, we can actually add a couple of multiple items in here just so we have an idea of what we're working with. So instead of having just one div, let's call this one inner1. Then we can have a couple more. We can call this inner2 and inner3. Actually, we can, instead of giving them IDs, we can give them classes. Class. So all of them can have the same class of inner. Now, inner, just so we can see them, will have a width of 100 pixels, a height of 100 pixels, a background color of gray, and there we go. And here we can just, of course, maybe make the margin, and we just make sure we can also see the margin if needed. And we can say the background color should be, like, so here we do see the margin, and here we have the divs as well. Now I'm going to give all of them a margin of 1 rem just so we can actually see these squares that we're trying to look at. So you can see here we actually have these squares. Now sometimes you would like these squares to actually be next to each other. One way you can do this is to, instead of using a div, you can use a span. However, that is with HTML, and as you can see, it has its own little flaws. So now you have to do a bunch of things to fix what you just did and add a bunch more CSS. The CSS way to fix this, which is much simpler, is to just say display flex. And this should of course be on the margin and not the inner. So it should be on the parent of the items you want next to each other. And now they will all be in this nice horizontal row. Now I have a bunch of things you can test out, such as the flex direction. So let's say you don't want it to be in a row, but you do want it to be in a column. So flex direction column. And if we were to put values in here just so we can keep track of them, so this can be banana, car, and games. So here all of them have values. We can also do column reverse, and this will flip them. So now games will be here and banana will be on the bottom. Well, column will keep them in the original direction. Row is what it is by default when we say display flex. And if we were to say row reverse, it would of course do the opposite, or it will of course reverse him, just like we saw before, and it will be games, then car, then banana. Now sometimes, if there isn't enough space, as in this scenario, you might want to make this wrap, so make it go to the next line. This is a great way to implement some sort of feature where mobile devices will be able to better view your website by making things go to the next line if the screen is small. So we can go flex wrap and say wrap, and that will wrap it once it gets too small. So as you can see, as the screen gets bigger, it does not wrap it, but as it gets smaller, it does wrap them. If you don't want it to ever wrap, and this is by default, you can say no wrap, and it will just squeeze them all in as much as it can. And you of course have wrap reverse. So again, it will flip it. So now games will be here, but now there will also be this open space here, which originally would have been here. And then car is here and banana is here. And you can merge these two into one command by just going flex flow, and we can say row wrap. And now we can just remove that, and it's the same concept but just in one line. It depends on which you prefer. Again, it doesn't matter which one you specifically use. Now let's say we have this nice big page and we want this all to be in the center. If that is the case, we can say justify content center, and that will center it into this square here, into this parent div. If you always wanted to start from here, we can say flex start, and it will always start from here. Or if you want to start from the end, we can say flex end, and I will start from the end. But sometimes having the center there isn't exactly what you want. Maybe you want equal spacing between all of these. They can say space evenly, and then there will be equal spacing between each of these. The spacing might be a little different because we have margins, but without the margins, if we were to remove these, spacing would look a little bit more equal. You can also have space around, and it will add spacing before, between, and after each one of these. And then we have space between, which will maximize the amount of space that can be used here. Now, if we were to make sure this one has a big height, such as 200 pixels, if we were to say align items, we can say center to center it vertically. So justify content makes it easy to center it horizontally whilst align items vertically. And again, you could do flex start again. This will do from the top, flex end, which will do it from the bottom. And then you also have stretch. And it will try and stretch this items to fill the container, which is actually by default. So if we were to remove these, you'll notice they stretch downwards. So if we were to remove this height constraint here, then it will do this. But if we save it, then the height constraint will force it to not go like that. But by default, it is stretch. So if we were to do this and remove stretch, you'll notice it stays the same. If we were to do flex start, then as you'll notice, it's not the same as if we were to remove this here, because this is stretch. We also have baseline. And again, this is if we don't have like this height constraint here. So if we were to go here and let's maybe give, and this is resize this a little bit, let's maybe give this one here a special font size, of font size or style, font size. And let's do the same for this one. And we'll make this one 0.5 rem. By default, it is 1 rem. So if we do this, you'll notice that these are almost in the center of each other. By using baseline, this will align the items by the text baseline. So right here at the bottom, you'll notice car also starts there, and games as well. So let's say we had more of these as such. Another thing you can do is say align dash content, and we can say space between. And it will maximize the amount of space between each of these values vertically. And again, you have space around, and you have space evenly. And then of course you have stretch. You also have center, flex end, flex start, and so on. Now let's say we want to order these in a specific order. I'm just going to do that, or maybe go space between, like that. So let's say you want to order these into a specific order. I'm just going to make these A, and then B, and then C. So we have different values here. We can then add style, order, and here we can give all of them a specific order. And this only works if you're flexing it with the parent. So here we could say, instead of being order number 1, we can make this order number 2, 4, 1, 3, 5, and this one can stay 6. Now take note, banana will now be here where car is, and car will now be here where A is. If we save that, you'll notice we have changed the order of which the elements are found in. So you can do this to order them. In our case, we could have done this in the CSS file, but then we would have had to add a an ID to these divs so we can differentiate between what which div does. And outside of order, you also have flex grow. And flex grow specifies how much a specific item should grow. So we do this, it will all stay exactly the same almost. If we were to replace these ones with 0, then it will be its default values. If we were to just maybe make car 1, you'll notice it's bigger than the rest now. And like this, you can specify how much space each one should take up. And of course, depending on how much you make one grow over the other, one may take more space than the other would. You also have shrink, which specifies how much an item should shrink relative to the rest of the items here. So instead of flex grow, we can say shrink. And let's say we make this 5. If we were to resize this, then if we were to remove this wrap here, then you'll notice this car here is sized a lot smaller than the rest. Just ignore the fact that they're going off screen. And this is because we are shrinking the amount that this is allowed to take. Of course, we could have just hit 1 here, gotten the same effect. But if you have multiple values, so let's say we have 1 here, we have 2 here, then you'll notice this one will shrink a little bit more than this one. And so on. Shrinking is something you have to play with to really grasp and understand the concept. So I'd recommend maybe taking this as a little bit of homework and playing with flex, especially flex grow and flex shrink, in your free time. See how it changes depending on what values you give each of these and so on. And that is that for flex. Flex is very, very powerful. It might seem very complex at first, but later on you'll notice flex isn't that difficult to really get the grasp of, and it's easy to use once you really dive into it. Flex is a great way to add mobile support to your website that might be too big to fit on mobile screens, or to just make things go from a column to a row, much simpler than a lot of other methods. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next CSS tutorial.